Hi everyone, Aiden here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at our etrailer RV bumper mounted cargo carrier with the cargo carrier cage. This is going to be a 24-inch by 84-inch enclosed carrier for your campers, and it's going to give you a great secure place to hold a lot of different things, whether it be big coolers, camping chairs, or your generator. Let's check it out. Now this is going to be a full complete kit. So it comes with all the things you need: the cage, the cargo carrier, and some bumper mounted supports. Now with how it attaches to the bumper, it's going to just clamp around that square tube, coming in at 4-inch by 4-inch or 4-inch by 4.5-inch. And you can see what those clamps look like down below a little bit better, where they just slide over the top and secure underneath with a bolt, giving you two different hole options for that potential different bumper dimension. Now, this can support a 442-pound load of cargo, and the whole carrier itself is going to weigh quite a bit too. So I'd strongly recommend using those bumper supports, especially if you plan on using this with some heavier items like generators or really big coolers, because it's going to put a lot of stress on your bumper. And more often than not, when we see campers come in the shop, those bumpers are not always welded on the most securely. So that support bracket is going to help quite a bit. Furthermore, I'd maybe even just recommend replacing the bumper entirely. Mountain Lock has some replacement bumpers that we carry that come in at the correct dimensions to work with the carrier kit here, and they're going to attach much more strongly. So if you do plan on loading these things up heavy, I think that would be a really worthwhile investment for your camper, because the last thing you want is to have some sort of failure going down the road. To ensure that doesn't happen though, just check your weight capacities and always go by the lowest rated component, whether that be the carrier or your bumper. With this being a bigger carrier, you need to not just consider the weight, but the physical size, because it's likely going to start blocking things in the back of your camper, including your taillights and your license plate. So you can fix those with a light kit or with a license plate relocation bracket. I'd strongly recommend looking at those, especially if you're driving through states that require things like your license plate be visible when driving. Depending on the camper though, you might find that it's just fine. On our camper today, you can see a little bit of the taillights, and the license plate is offset to the side, but it could always be better, and if you want to play it safe, then you can get those extra kits to make those things more visible, especially if you plan on driving at night, because the included reflector tape stickers are going to help with visibility, but lights are always going to be better. But let's get this opened up and take a look at the cargo inside. You've got two swinging doors that hold together with this pin and retaining clip at the bottom, and a lock up top. That included lock is going to help tremendously with security, because if someone did want to get in here, they're going to have to break through that or pick it, and it's just going to be way more of a hassle. Any kind of lock is just going to be a great theft deterrent, and for me, that's one of the big draws to a carrier like this, especially if you plan on leaving your generator in it. You can leave it unattended with a little bit more peace of mind because of that. Now, our camper today isn't parked super level, so the doors just kind of swing open. If your camper's taking a bit of a nosedive, the doors just might want to stay closed all the time. So I'd recommend just leveling out your camper if you need to get something out of here. But the opening you get is super wide, 49 inches wide and 23 inches tall. So it makes it extremely easy for your smaller items, of course, but even the bigger things like this large cooler. You've got plenty of room to get both hands on it and unload it or reload it when it's time to head out to your next destination or just back home. One thing I'd recommend is when you are loading things up and getting on your way is to be careful with strapping things down. Yes, the carrier is enclosed, but if you don't have things fully packed and there's room for things to slide around and maybe tip over, then you run the risk of maybe damaging something or the carrier cage. Or with your smaller items, like these camp chairs, there are plenty of gaps that are large enough here where those smaller items could maybe sneak out if they're not secured down properly. All of the major gaps in the cage are about 6 inches wide, so that's more than enough for something small to slip out. And it's just a good idea to, when you have those smaller items, play it safe, strap it down, and make sure that it's not going anywhere. One thing to know though with this is that the ends of the carrier will be a little less accessible. So for me, I'd put things that you plan on keeping in the cage pretty much full time in those corner spots, like our generator here. When we get to the campsite and unload things like camp chairs, coolers, maybe a duffel bag or two, that's going to probably go into the camper for our trip. But you'll probably be leaving the generator out here. And we've set this up in such a way that the exhaust is pointing away from the camper, and all of our plugs and ports are accessible from the side through these large gaps. So in theory, we could lock this cage back up and run the generator inside it so that no one can mess with it when we're not around. It's a really handy way to use it, and by putting it in the corner here, we're not ever really worried about having trouble accessing this because it's just going to live there full time. As you can see, we've got a lot of stuff loaded in here. Our generator on one side, a large power station on the other, the biggest cooler we could find in our shop, some bags, and some camp chairs. But your actual usable space of interior dimensions is going to be 84 inches wide, 24 inches deep, and something else to consider that you might not be used to with other cargo carriers is your usable height, because we are limited by the ceiling of that cage. So from the floor of the carrier to the top or the bottom edge of this ceiling, it's about 28 inches. So overall, it's not too bad, a little over 2 feet. You'll see that with our large cooler there. There's plenty of room still above it, so if we had something like a suitcase or a duffel bag, we could probably slide it on top of that, no problem. With everything unloaded, we can better see the structure underneath, and it's all going to be this steel construction, black powder coat finish, and these bars are really thick. So if you need to strap something down to it, or even run a hook directly to one of these bars, it's going to hold up really well. I just watch out for any scratches and scuffs to that powder coat, because the steel underneath could be susceptible to rust and corrosion over time. You can always fix that though by touching it up with some rust-resistant paint as needed. But because it's an open design here, again, smaller items you want to just watch out for so that they don't sneak through those gaps. But if you do have messier items like a leaky cooler or a generator, you don't have to worry about anything pooling up underneath and soaking your cargo. It'll drain through and be pretty easy to clean. With how large the carrier is, you're probably worried about storage. But honestly, I just leave it attached to the bumper full time. If you have a cover for your camper, most of those covers have a pretty big tolerance to allow them to fit over things like AC units, propane tank covers at the front, or potentially a cargo carrier at the back. So it's likely that your cover will still fit, always double check, but you should be able to store this no problem. And then you don't have to find a place to put it in your garage during the off season. If you bring your camper to a site to store during the winter, just leave this with it. And if you have anything like a generator that you just keep with your camper full time, then maybe just lock it up inside the cage for that winter storage. Then you don't have to worry about it, and it keeps your stuff a little bit more safe. But overall, I think this is a really solid addition for your camper. It's going to add a ton of storage space and be a real benefit, especially for smaller campers that maybe don't have as many storage compartments. It gives you a place to put those larger, bulkier items and maybe things that you don't want to keep inside your vehicle or your camper, like a generator. The one thing I'd say to watch for is just your bumper size, because this one is just super big. And if you have something already there, like a bike rack or a spare tire carrier, you're likely going to have to remove that. There's fixes where you could just put your spare tire in the cage now, but that's now taking up precious cargo space. So if this is maybe a little bit too big, I'd recommend checking out the kit that's 24 by 60 inches. It's just going to be a smaller version of what you see here. The other thing to note is that if you already have that bumper cargo carrier, since it has been out for a while, you can always get the cage separately if you want to upgrade your existing carrier. But regardless, I think it's going to be a really solid way to carry a lot of extra stuff with you and keep it safe when you're going on your camping trips. This has just been our look at the eTrailer enclosed RV bumper mounted cargo carrier. My name's Aiden, and thank you for watching.